सेव किया था ना?
मैं सिर्फ इसलिए गया था क्योंकि उसने मुझे कॉल किया, that's it. But listen तो.
Save it for someone else.
जिंदगी में सेव करना जरूरी है, मगर जब बात पैसों की हो, सिर्फ सेविंग से काम नहीं चलेगा। इक्विटी म्यूचुअल फंड्स में इन्वेस्ट कीजिए और अपने सेविंग्स को आगे बढ़ने का मौका दीजिए।
Mutual fund investments are subject to market risks. Read all scheme-related documents carefully.
If the ongoing Shanghai Cooperation Organization or SCO ministerial in Goa, top-level ministerial in Goa is unusually tense by the standards of such multilateral events, it is because two of its key members are at odds with a third. Or, if you find it more appropriate to put it this way, because one of its key members, the host, is at odds with two other key members, right? So you can put the names here, that is China, Pakistan, India, or India, Pakistan, China. Don't fall for the temptation, the easy temptation of just dismissing it as the more things change, the more they remain the same. So what's the big deal? There are indeed things that remain the same, like India's slow strategic asphyxiation in the China-Pakistan pincer. China from one side, Pakistan on the other. I know we don't like it, and I know the moment I say Pakistan, many of you will turn up your noses, but the fact is that however weak Pakistan may be, but in combination with China, it is the other pincer round our necks, round India's necks. So there are things that remain the same, like India's slow strategic asphyxiation in the China-Pakistan pincer. Dr. Manmohan Singh had described this as a straightforward case of China using Pakistan as a cheap instrument to triangulate India. Beyond that, since he handed over the keys to Narendra Modi in the summer of 2014, much has changed in the world and in our region, and also among SCO members. This SCO summit, this ongoing SCO summit, is as good a moment as any to take stock of what has changed and what hasn't. For now, for the moment, let's focus on the three in our triangle. I know that there is a fourth country in SCO whose fortunes have also changed dramatically, that is Russia. But for now, let's mostly talk about India, Pakistan, China, or Pakistan, China, India in that order. Then we will explore beyond this in our subsequent columns of national interest. A good place to begin is an assessment of how each one of the three neighbors' comprehensive national power, or CNP, has evolved in the post-2014 decade. The concept of CNP, by the way, is something we owe to the Chinese discourse, the expression or the Chinese equivalent, which I would struggle to pronounce, but something like Chunghe Goli, you will see the spellings on your screens, that began appearing in Chinese publications and Chinese strategic discourse about 3 decades ago. In fact, if you look at recorded history from about 1992 onwards, comprehensive national power. What is it? As you would imagine, comprehensive national power takes into account a combination of factors, or lots of factors, not all empirical and not all measurable. It's complex. From the size and growth of the economy, you might have a big economy but growing very slowly, right? Or you might have a small economy but growing very fast. So from the size and the growth rate of the economy, the strength and cohesion of a society, and the firepower and quality of the military, to trade and soft power. Soft power is also very important. But these things are not easy to quantify, right? These things are easy to list, but they are not easy to quantify or convert into numbers or rankings. So people would say, oh, on CNP, such and such country is number 1, such and such is number 77. Those things, all rankings will find some traction. People will read them, Google likes them, they will find retweets, etc. But it's very difficult to quantify these and to convert these into rankings. But you can see the relative strength. That is the important way of making an assessment. On most of these metrics, Pakistan, for example, would be a near nothing today, right? The decline of Pakistan over the past decade has been phenomenal. Where, however, will its 200 plus nukes and massive armed forces place it overall? Because that's also part of its CNP. So everything else may have declined, but these ones remain like constant factors. Then see it purely from India's point of view. Thanks to its nukes and nuisance value, Pakistan isn't as total a cipher as many in India would have loved to see it to be. The determinants of a nation's CNP, therefore, are also defined by how these matter, how these affect their friends, adversaries, and most importantly, neighbors, which is the case with us. Pakistan is today the weakest it's been since the eve of the Soviet invasion of Afghanistan in 1979. That's when Pakistan was recovering from the breakup in 1971, the big defeat, the rise of Bhutto turning into a dictator, then Zia throwing out Bhutto, etc., etc. Pakistan was really weak then, and the world had no interest in Pakistan. In fact, much as Bhutto had tried to get the Islamic world interested in Pakistan, even on the promise of creating not a Pakistani bomb, but an Islamic bomb, which he might share with the entire Ummah, Pakistan wasn't finding much traction. But the Soviet invasion of Afghanistan changed that. Therefore, when I say that Pakistan is today the weakest it's been since the eve of the Soviet invasion of Afghanistan in 1979, I mean to make a very significant statement. I am taking a deep breath and saying it. It's a serious statement. Pakistan is today ruled by a coalition government with a pretense of being popularly elected, but with even less credibility than Zia-ul Haq's in 1979. It might sound odd for me to say this, but the fact is that whether we liked Zia or not, in 1979, Zia's word was law. Nobody will say so today for Shehbaz Sharif and his cabinet. Pakistan won a suicidal, ego and ideology-driven victory in Afghanistan by defeating its own most valuable ally of 65 years and is now left with almost no chips on the strategic negotiating table. If its geostrategic location has been Pakistan's most significant monetizable asset, Pakistan has now blown it by backing the Taliban in that bizarre search for strategic depth, right? They thought that they will go westwards and find strategic depth in Afghanistan in case columns of Indian tanks come driving into the Punjab desert, South Punjab desert. Those are memories and scars that the Pakistani military establishment carries from 1987 from General Sundarji's exercise brass tacks. So this nonsensical search for strategic depth is what drove Pakistan into this, what I described just now as a suicidal victory in Afghanistan. If Pakistan's geostrategic location so far has been its most significant monetizable asset, it has blown it by backing the Taliban in that bizarre search for strategic depth. The Gulf Arabs have moved on from where commitment to Sunni Islam determined their policies in the region, that is our region, India, Pakistan, Bangladesh, right up to Maldives. They moved on. They have no patience for Pakistan and its constant demands now. This has reduced Pakistan to being China's vassal state today. And even then, there is a problem because it now has to share that tent with another enormously more powerful vassal, that is Russia. Russia is way more valuable to China than Pakistan. At this point, almost nothing is going right for Pakistan. It's left with only one card to play, that is India, and that too by being a nuisance to India. Its value to China, Pakistan's value to China, also lies in helping keep India militarily off balance or stretched, if not off balance. That's of great value to China. Beyond that, the rest of the world is fed up of complaints, laments, demands, and frequent moral outrage by Pakistan. What this means for India, we'll come to in a bit. China is a complete contrast. The decade has seen Xi Jinping define Chinese power in his name and his dictatorial thought, leveraging 4 decades of super growth. In fact, in some ways, he's become as strong a leader, if not stronger, than Mao, because Mao at least had other leaders around him. There were Zhou Enlai, there were others, but Xi Jinping's is a one-man dictatorship. Technology, trade, military power, social cohesion, and rising global stature have all enabled China to close the gap with the US and the larger Western power and increase the gap between itself and the rest, especially India, because ultimately what matters to us is India. Strategically, the war in Ukraine has been both good and bad for China. On balance, probably more bad and good. It knocks out the BRI plans from now because a lot of that was to happen through Central Asia, former Soviet republics, and then into Europe. It knocks out the BRI plans for now. It weakens its most important ally, that's Russia, and unites the West. The good thing is how much more dependent it has made Russia on China. So China then has a Pakistan in Europe, just that Pakistan is called Russia. In any 2014-24 projection, regrettably, on no parameter or CNP can India credibly be considered to have narrowed the gap with China. That is the unfortunate truth. India has grown phenomenally in many ways, in many areas, and there is much good happening. For example, the massive new construction of heavy physical infrastructure, roads, ports, airways, power, and so on. There is also military modernization. There is also the pace of acquisitions picking up. There is also the Made in India push, which will take some time coming to fruition. Nevertheless, the gap, India has grown in every area, but the gap with China has only widened. That's what happens when a much bigger mass has momentum on its side. The management of the fiscal situation and deficits despite the pandemic have been big pluses and big gains for India, and the growth rate is still the world's highest for a large economy. But the inherited gap was too much. China isn't slowing, and even if India grows faster, even if China starts growing at half the pace of India per year, or even less than half the pace of India per year, the gap will still only increase because China has built such a huge head start. China's economy today is 5 times India's. That's not going to change. As I said a moment back, that gap inevitably will only increase. Militarily, wide budgetary and firepower gaps apart, China has very deliberately dragged India in strength to the borders. In the process, India is now fully stretched militarily along both frontiers. I am searching for parallels but cannot find a phase in our history when we were so fully committed operationally on both frontiers, not one but both frontiers at the same time. The trouble is, in this equation, India has no initiative to seize militarily. There is no move that India can make right now militarily, strategically or tactically. India just has to wait. So India has nothing else to do except to wait in case the other side makes a move. That's not a good place to be in. Those moves, meanwhile, are in our vital neighborhood. Bhutan, for example. So the Chinese are making moves, but they are not making moves with their troops to provoke ours. They are making moves. They are using these pressure tactics now over Bhutan because that's where common border interests, common territorial interests are involved when conflicts arise. Which brings us to a place we are familiar with because we've been there for more than 6 decades now. In his 10th year as Prime Minister and the last in his second term, what would Narendra Modi write in his self-appraisal report on India's CNP and strategic positioning? Self-appraisal as he completes his 10 years in power. The picture on the CNP is pretty good. India's is a remarkable success story of a country becoming so enormously powerful long before it became rich or even lower middle class in terms of per capita GDP. None of this is God-given. Modi and his government's management of larger national interest deserve quite a bit of credit for what has happened in these 10 years. In the self-appraisal process, however, Modi might have questions to ask himself on the most formidable strategic challenge before India that he inherited from the UPA, the triangulation between China and Pakistan. The slow asphyxiation by an unmoving pincer, the failure to break out of it or even loosen it a bit is something to reflect on. It doesn't matter whether you are a fan of Narendra Modi's or a critic. In any case, you will not believe that merely leaving India to its strategic status quo of 2014 was on his list of KRAs as he concludes a decade in power. So that on the strategic picture, that is a job unfinished. That is leading India to either break out of or at least loosen this twin pincer of Pakistan and China.